From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
On behalf of the Afghanistan nation and the sentiment of Afghans, in fact world Muslims, we repeat our demand the American government put on trial and punish those who committed this action.
Outrage against the NATO occupation of Afghanistan boils over after U.S. troops burn copies of the Quran. We'll go to Kabul for an update from Time reporter John Wendell. Then WikiLeaks has begun releasing millions of emails from Stratfor, a U.S. company known as a shadow CIA.
Today, WikiLeaks begins its release of 5,000 emails documenting the private lives and private lies of private spies.
Emails from Stratfor implicate some of the world's largest firms in the monitoring of activists and demonstrations. We'll get an update from WikiLeaks spokesperson and talk to one of those monitored by Stratfor, Andy Bichlbaum of the Yes Men, who posed as a Dow Chemical spokesperson and appeared on BBC World News.
It's 20 years since the disaster, and today I'm very happy to announce that for the first time Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe. We have a $12 billion plan to finally, at long last, fully compensate the victims.
Stratfor emails show Dow monitoring the Yes Men. Plus, after controversial elections amidst a wave of protests, we'll look at what's happening in Senegal, what's being called the new African Spring. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Associated Press is reporting Israeli officials have privately told the Obama administration they won't warn the United States if they decide to launch a preemptive strike against Iranian nuclear facilities. The news comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu prepares for a trip to Washington next week for meetings with President Barack Obama. Both Netanyahu and Obama are scheduled to address a conference organized by AIPAC, the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee. The Wall Street Journal is reporting Obama's considering using his AIPAC speech on Sunday to more forcefully outline potential military actions against Iran. Meanwhile, scores of organizations have endorsed a series of protests dubbed Occupy AIPAC to coincide with the AIPAC conference in Washington. Syrian forces shelled an opposition stronghold in Hama province, killing 20 people today, according to Syrian activists. Meanwhile, 2 wounded foreign journalists trapped inside Syria have been smuggled safely to Lebanon. British photographer Paul Conroy and French journalist Edith Bouvier were both wounded in a government-backed attack in Bab Amr last week. French photographer William Daniel and Spaniard Javier Espinosa are still inside Syria, but efforts are underway to evacuate them. On Monday, International Committee of the Red Cross spokesperson Hikam Hassan warned about the crisis facing the Syrian city of Homs.
For us, the humanitarian situation is degenerating by the hour, and this is why it is absolutely important that we enter as soon as possible. On one hand, to evacuate all those who need to be evacuated, and on the other hand, to bring in much-needed assistance.
In other news on Syria, the Prime Minister of Qatar has publicly called for the arming of rebel groups in Syria, despite concerns it could lead to a regional war.
I think we should do whatever necessary to help them, including giving them weapons to defend themselves. I think by international law, defending themselves against what the force, Bashar al-Assad force do for them, they have the legitimacy to defend themselves.
A new independent report has revealed the Japanese government withheld information about the full dangers of last year's nuclear disaster from its own people and from the United States. Reuters is reporting Japan's then Prime Minister ordered workers to remain at the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant as fears mounted that a chain reaction at the plant would force the entire city of Tokyo to be evacuated. At the time, Japanese officials were fearing thousands of spent fuel rods stored at a damaged reactor would melt and spew radiation across large parts of the country. Police in London have arrested 20 Occupy London activists and dismantled the Occupy encampment outside St. Paul's Cathedral, where protesters have been staying for 4 months. Police removed 50 tents. Simon Hill of the Christian group Ecclesia accused the police of using brutal force to dismantle the encampment.
Some of us from Christianity Uncut knelt on the floor to pray, and bailiffs had to push past us, and then they charged in and started pulling down the tents. And it was very quick. It was very brutal. There's people who've been sleeping in those tents for 4 months, seen their homes uprooted, and there were people appealing to the bailiffs. There were people calling out. All the resistance I've seen has been entirely non-violent.
Some Occupy London protesters are vowing to continue the protest.
A lot of people are saying that to me as if this is it now, this is over. It's not. This is just the beginning. This is just where it starts to kick off. A lot of these people, including myself, will be willing to stay here regardless. The only thing that's being told to move right now is the tents. We're not being told to move, so we're going to stay here for as long as we can.
That protester was wearing a Guy Fawkes mask, or V for Vendetta. Millions of workers in India have launched a 24-hour strike in a major push for workers' rights. The strike is backed by India's 11 major trade unions and has swept through multiple industries, including banking, transportation, and postal services. Demands include a minimum wage, permanent jobs for contract workers, and an end to privatization of public companies. The unions are also pressing the government to take steps to curb inflation and rising prices. In news from Latin America, the Colombian rebel group FARC has announced it will abandon its decades-long policy of kidnapping for ransom and free all military and police hostages it holds in jungle camps. The move is seen as the latest sign the FARC wants to move toward a peace deal with the government. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear oral arguments today on whether corporations can be sued in U.S. courts for human rights abuses committed overseas. The case involves 9 Nigerian activists executed for protesting Royal Dutch Shell. Visit our website, democracynow.org, for full coverage of the case. The White House has embraced a plan for TransCanada to build a 485-mile oil pipeline from Oklahoma to Texas. The move comes a month after President Obama blocked the construction of a 1,700-mile TransCanada pipeline from the Alberta tar sands to Texas. It's primary day in Michigan and Arizona. Former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney and former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum appear to be in a dead heat in Michigan, where Romney was born and where his father once served as governor. Romney's expected to easily win in Arizona. On Monday, Romney criticized Santorum's work resume.
Senator Santorum's a nice guy, but he's never had a job in the private sector. He's worked as a lobbyist and worked as an elected official. That's fine. But if the issue of the day is the economy, I think to create jobs, it helps to have a guy as president who's had a job, and I have.
Presidential hopeful Rick Santorum also campaigned in Michigan on Monday.
As you can imagine, pretty excited to be here. This was not a place that, frankly, I thought we were going to be competing at the level that we were competing here in the state of Michigan. But we're excited because this is a great place to show the kind of potential that our campaign has, and being able to connect and attract the voters that are absolutely essential for us to be able to win this election in the general election. That's the focus.
A report by the Center for Tax Justice has found General Electric made $81 billion in U.S. pre-tax profits over the past decade, but paid just 2.3% of its profits in taxes, far lower than the official 35% corporate tax rate. Between 2006 and 2011, GE received a tax rebate of $2.7 billion. The city of Stockton, California, is expected to move closer today to becoming the largest city in the United States to file for bankruptcy. The city has a long-term debt of $700 million and has already laid off many workers, including a quarter of its police force. The British police officer leading an investigation into a bribery scandal at Rupert Murdoch's newspapers in Britain has revealed journalists at Murdoch's newspaper, The Sun, often paid large sums of cash to corrupt police officers and public officials in exchange for private information. The disclosure could give ammunition to the FBI and other U.S. government agencies to prosecute Murdoch's firm News Corp for violating U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Murdoch owns several major media assets in the United States, including Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, and The New York Post. Sue Akers, Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the British Metropolitan Police Service, outlined her findings on Monday.
There also appears to have been a culture at the Sun of illegal payments, and systems have been created to facilitate those payments, whilst hiding the identity of the officials receiving the money. The emails indicate that payments to sources were openly referred to within the Sun, and in which case the source is not named, but rather the category public official is identified rather than the name.
Sue Akers said employees at Murdoch's newspaper paid out large bribes to police officers and public officials.
Ones that involve just the odd drink or a meal to police officers or other public officials. These are cases in which arrests have been made involving the delivery of regular, frequent and sometimes significant sums of money to small numbers of public officials by journalists. Some of the initial emails reveal, upon analysis, that multiple payments have been made to individuals amounting to thousands of pounds. In one case, over a period of several years, this amounts to in excess of £80,000.
Schools in Chardon, Ohio are closed today, one day after a shooting inside the Chardon High School cafeteria left 2 students dead and 3 others injured. Daniel Permator, believed to be age 16, was the first student to be reported dead. Russell King Jr., age 17, also died from his wounds. Police have arrested the alleged gunman, a 17-year-old student from a nearby school. A New York federal judge on Monday dismissed a lawsuit brought by thousands of organic farmers against the agribusiness giant Monsanto. The farmers were seeking to prevent Monsanto from suing them if their crops become contaminated by Monsanto's patented products, which can drift onto nearby fields. Daniel Ravitcher, lead attorney for the plaintiffs, said some farmers have stopped growing certain crops to avoid a lawsuit. He called the judge's decision gravely disappointing. And gay rights groups in Tennessee are making a last attempt to block legislation that would ban all discussion of homosexuality in the state's schools. The controversial bill bans any teaching about sexuality apart from, quote, natural human reproduction science in kindergarten through 8th grade. The original version, which has been amended, would have barred, quote, any instruction or material that discusses sexual orientation other than heterosexuality. Rights groups express fears the measure could block school staff from addressing bullying of LGBT students. 2 teenagers in Tennessee recently committed suicide after they were bullied about their sexuality. The bill has passed the state Senate and is expected to face another vote today. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.